I want to bring in my guest, joining me from Los Angeles, forensic psychiatrist, body language expert, Dr. Carole Lieberman. Let's start with a clip. This is from one of the defense witnesses. This defense team brought in not one, not two, but three expert witnesses to testify to Sidney Powell being insane at the time that she stabbed her mother to death. And let's talk about the fact that there were no risk factors, nothing to send up some big red flags to let anybody know this could happen. Dr. Carole, would you speak to that aspect of it, please?
Well, yes. You know, they're witnesses. This case is just really getting to me because, I mean, there are so many things that are screaming. I mean, here he's saying he could almost be an expert for the prosecution. He's saying this is a very atypical case, which is true. You know, there's something obviously was going on with her during the time that she was doing so badly in college as compared to high school. And yes, as I said before to you, this is the age that schizophrenia can first show itself, but not in this way. There is usually that kind of a history. And I just hope the jury, you know, first of all, it's so interesting that the defense has had experts, except for the one who's currently treating her, a psychiatrist, just giving her medication, but their experts have all been psychologists. Now, psychologists don't usually treat schizophrenics because schizophrenics, besides, you know, those who are fortunate enough to get psychotherapy, they're also on medication. So it is psychiatrists who generally have much more familiarity with schizophrenics. And they were doing all these testings and so on, you know. And one of them, the psychologist, Dr. Reardon, who was the main one who the defense had, was saying something about, like, you can't diagnose unless you have give these psychological tests. Really? And how do psychiatrists diagnose all the time? They don't usually use tests. That's a psychologist thing. You really need to be able to diagnose from your examination of the person. You shouldn't need tests to prove one thing or the other. So it just, I'm just screaming at the television, you know, saying, no.
Because you don't believe that she was insane at the time, Dr. Carole. Is that why you're frustrated? You don't believe it. Why don't you believe it, please?
Well, for one thing, even putting aside what her real diagnosis is, and notice that no expert witness or no mental health professional saw her until after she killed her mother, and some of them said she has PTSD and so on. So her psychiatric symptoms, you know, could well have to do with her having killed her mother, or at least some of them. Why don't I believe that? That she didn't know the wrongfulness? Well, for one thing, she covered it up. She did two things right at the time of the killing. One, when she tried to pretend that she was her mother, and two, when she tried to stage the murder scene so that it was an intruder. Now, if somebody is in the throes of a psychotic episode, they don't know to be able to do those kinds of things. Another thing is, you know, they're making a big deal of the fact that they don't know a motive. What would be the motive? They loved each other. Well, you know, they may well have loved each other, but it wasn't all perfect. It wasn't all perfect. So, you know, no one's telling the motive. She's not telling the motive. It doesn't mean that there isn't one. Clearly, things weren't all hunky-dory between the two of them, because the mother wrote those texts about scamming. You know, I think you're scamming me, or words to that effect. So I just hope the jury isn't buying it.
Okay, Dr. Carole, appreciate you giving us, you know, your unfettered opinion here, and thank you for, you know, just not holding anything back. We appreciate it. And I got a note as you were talking here that the state, their last witness on rebuttal is a psychologist. So for what it's worth, you were saying, I'm frustrated there aren't psychiatrists. The defense did call one, as you acknowledged. They called three experts, you know, two who were psychologists, one psychiatrist, and now the fourth we're going to hear from is a psychologist that the state is calling. Okay, Dr. Carole, what do you say to what we just heard in that interview with Dawn about the treating psychiatrist saying that he has not seen any malingering from Sidney Powell?
Well, first of all, let me just tell you, I trained in psychiatry. My residency was at Bellevue, which is the schizophrenia capital of the world. And I've done research in schizophrenia, so I know schizophrenia. And, I don't think, I think yes, the defense attorney is doing a great job, with what he has. And just because, as I said before, just because someone we don't know the motive, doesn't mean that she doesn't have one. And certainly she's not going to tell. Plus, if she really is this seriously ill with schizophrenia, and they are letting her stay with her grandmother on a farm, that is very dangerous. Because what if Sydney decides, which a lot of times this happens, I don't want to take this medication anymore. It makes me feel dull or whatever. And she stops taking it. That means that her grandmother could be at risk.
I got you, Dr. Carole. So Dr. Carole wanted to get a question into you. And this isn't on the substance. We haven't even heard the substance yet. This is just about the fact that the prosecution called this doctor who hasn't opined in this area yet and hasn't evaluated her. As a lawyer, I'm sitting back here going, oh my gosh. And as someone you are a qualified expert, Dr. Carole. You have done this before. You know the process. Did that stun you as much as it stunned me?
Yes. It was theirs to lose, in my opinion. It was the state's case to lose. And why they would pick somebody like this, I will say she did hold up pretty well under this, challenge to her qualifications and so on. She didn't get all flustered, or at least she didn't show it as much as what she might have. But no, he should have gotten, well, of course, he should have gotten a psychiatrist, and he should have gotten, does it mean, did she not even see her at all, or she just didn't test her? Because I was a little confused from some of the previous testimony of the defense's witnesses as to whether she just didn't see her at all. There's no excuse for not seeing her at all.
Right, Dr. Carole. And that's something I think we're going to get some clarification on, because I'm not sure. I can't wait to see how this woman would have come into contact with the case if she was the expert in the jail. Like we've talked about, there's going to be a doctor who works for the county. There is one in Summit County, certainly. Where is that doctor? Why aren't they testifying about what they found? To me, that's the big question. And I know, Don's been doing this for a long time. He's going to make a big deal about it. And Dr. Carole, you're right. If she did get the case, and they're going to call her as a witness in a case the nation's watching, you would think they would say, go evaluate her and give us a report for that. Dr. Carole Lieberman, thank you for all of your analysis. Been enjoying the conversation that's continuing on X about it. And we'll see what happens with this one. Dr. Carole, thank you for your expertise.